Because when you're great and new, we love you. Man, we'll build you into something that doesn't even exist. You're gonna change the world.
Beginning as a traveling salesman with nowhere to sleep but train stations, Kihachiro Sakaguchi was considered delusional. With barely any experience or money to fund his project, his ambitions of going global were considered delusional. But inspiration from an octopus helped rocket his small company into a multi-billion-dollar shoe brand. On the way, though, his arrogance created a rival bigger than any other, threatening to destroy his own business and all others in the industry. This is the story of Asics. Chapter 1. Moving Up. Born in the northern side of Tottori, Kihachiro Sakaguchi was destined to be an entrepreneur. After serving in the military during World War II, he only worked for 3 years at a big company before becoming fed up with management and corporate culture. To Sakaguchi, there was a much higher purpose to life. He was devoted to a singular mission: to improve the health of the population, believing that this would lift the spirit of an entire generation. And for him, the best way to get people active in sports was by manufacturing quality shoes. This kind of activity would instill values of discipline and purpose amidst the vacuum of post-war Japan. The problem was that Sakaguchi had no experience. After being adopted by his wife's family, a common practice in Japan, he had a new name, Kihachiro Onitsuka, which would form the basis of his new venture. The military had instilled a strong work ethic in him. Working tirelessly, Onitsuka eventually came up with a prototype. His first shoe was designed for basketball players, but when he trialed them with a local high school, the team's coach wasn't impressed. Onitsuka began focusing on increasing the grip of the bottom of the shoe. For weeks, he ruminated on how best to do it, and one day while he was having a meal with his mother, who had made octopus and cucumber salad, a brilliant innovation came to him. The octopus's suction cups lining their arms for grip provided the perfect model for grip. Onitsuka knew then that if he could harness this function for the soles of his new shoes, then they would provide the grip that the basketball players desperately needed. Even armed with the idea, though, Onitsuka didn't find immediate success. Chapter 2. A Tiger is Born. His company, Onitsuka Tiger, took hard work to get off the ground. The year was 1952, and in the context of Japan's post-war rebuilding effort, the economy was bouncing back, and Onitsuka was determined to see his company flourish. He had no savings to fall back on and was reduced to sleeping on the benches of train stations while he tried to sell his new shoes, visiting gyms and basketball courts. Eventually, his tenacity paid off. The high school basketball teams that used Onitsuka's Tiger shoes began to see results, winning tournaments and championships. Soon after, word spread about the increased grip and performance of the shoes, attracting interest from other teams. The following year, Kihachiro Onitsuka turned his attention to long-distance running. Talking with professional marathon runners, he learned that blisters had become a routine part of long-distance running, seemingly unavoidable. Picking apart the mechanics, he learned that it was an excess of heat on the body. That's when he developed the Onitsuka Tiger shoe. First used at the 1951 Boston Marathon, it featured a split toe, elastic band, and breathability inspired by the Japanese tabi socks. It was used by Japanese athlete Shigeki Tanaka, who ran to victory, marking the arrival of Tiger on the international stage. In 1952, though, the Onitsuka factory was ravaged by a fire, which halted production of the Onitsuka Marathon Tabi. Rising up was something even more popular called the Merup, a foam-soled shoe that took off immediately. And in the following years, Onitsuka would develop the Magic Runner, featuring a sophisticated air circulation system made up of vent intake and vent exhaust to keep feet cool while running. Chapter 3. Creating a Rival. Onitsuka was becoming so well known in the sporting world that it was attracting commercial and academic attention. These worlds combined in 1962 when Onitsuka's headquarters in Kobe were visited by a budding American businessman. His name was Phil Knight. and he was a former runner and PhD, approaching the Japanese company with a proposal to export the product to the US market. Knight had recently finished his PhD at Stanford in business. The thesis he wrote specifically about Japanese shoe companies having a huge potential in America. In the presentation to Onitsuka executives, he pointed to all the research he's gathered, the size of the market, the dominance of other Japanese products like cameras, and of course, the quality of their shoes. At the time, Adidas was the dominant shoe brand, but Knight could see the opportunity to undercut them, offering a cheaper price and superior quality. Kihachiro Onitsuka and his team were excited by the prospect to join the American market. The only problem was that Phil Knight doesn't yet have a distribution company. And so, after a handshake of agreement with his new Japanese partners, Phil returned to the United States, where he quickly formed a business with the name Blue Ribbon Sports. Phil was now the executive licensed distributor of Onitsuka in America, and after much anticipation, he received the first order of shoes in 1964, which he was easily able to sell to old track coaches and running teams. But messy management quickly deteriorated the partnership quickly. Onitsuka's shipments would routinely arrive late, and another distributor threatened legal action against Phil after they had been offered exclusive rights by Onitsuka too. This was eventually settled in 1966 when Phil flew to meet Kihachiro Onitsuka personally, negotiating an offer that would clear things up. He was able to convince Onitsuka to keep Blue Ribbon Sport as the executive distributor, but things were about to get bumpy for both parties. Chapter 4: The Birth of a Giant. But that was on paper. In practice, business between the two parties was unsustainable, marred by inconsistency. Delivery and communication between the two parties never improved. Phil grew suspicious that Onitsuka were meeting their Japanese demands first before sending the leftover stock to the States. Failing to keep its only American distributor happy was going to have huge consequences in the future. Under its nose, Onitsuka had created a monster that would soon grow much bigger than any had ever imagined. Blue Ribbon Sport, stationed out of Oregon, was steadily on the rise, despite Onitsuka's sabotage. In just its second year of operation, in 1965, the company made $20,000 in sales, equal to almost $200,000 today, allowing them to open their first retail store the following year. Phil Knight had founded the company with his former coach, Bill Bowerman, and the two began experimenting with their own shoe designs in the early 1970s, partly to ensure a reliable supply of stock. And much like Kihachiro Onitsuka, Bill Bowerman had a brilliant brainwave one day at his dining room table. Instead of an octopus's suction cup, though, he was inspired by the shape of a waffle iron, a raised square pattern that resembled the shape of a waffle. The waffle tread sole, later dubbed the moon shoe, gave more grip and a lightweight product. This proved to be a winning formula. The shoes were a hit, and Blue Ribbon Sport rebranded with a more familiar name, Nike. Chapter 5: Taking Over. Onitsuka could see the changing tides and sensed they were losing control of the American shoe market to the newcomer. Nike was already armed with simple and effective marketing, the soon-to-be iconic swoosh logo, and running shoes that rivaled Asics. And with production located in the United States, Nike was going to be much quicker to adapt and roll out to the most important market in the world. Onitsuka attempted to take over Nike in its early days. He offered the distributor who had once arrived at his office begging for the opportunity to cash out, but even with the lure of capital and experience against them, Nike's founders, Knight and Bowerman, refused to bend. They knew that they had a valuable company on their hands, and if Onitsuka was desperate to get his hands on it, that meant they shouldn't sell. In 1972, the partnership between Onitsuka Tiger and Blue Ribbon Sport officially ended, paving the way for Nike's dominance. The 1960s had been a roaring success for Onitsuka, highlighted by the 1968 Mexico City Olympics, where the entire Japanese team used Onitsuka shoes, for the first time streamlining its branding to focus on the new iconic tiger stripes, two vertical lines crossing two horizontal waves that originated from the heel of the shoe. This design first appeared on the Mexico 66 design. By the end of the decade, Onitsuka had established itself as the supreme running brand, high above that of its competitors, Adidas, with the release of the TG4 Marathons, the Cortez, and the Bangkok models. In 1977, the company's name changes from Onitsuka to Asics, merging three separate companies. Asics is an acronym for the Latin phrase anima sana in corpore sano. Translated to English, it means a sound mind in a sound body. This credo encapsulates the company's commitment to performance, health, and fitness above all else. Asics was going to need all three to endure the storm of what came next. Chapter 6: Fighting for Spotlight. The 1980s would be a decade of bold innovation for Asics as they headed in a completely different direction to their rivals at Nike, who released the Air Max and Air Jordan, moving dominantly into the casual footwear space. The sneaker industry was emerging, especially in the United States, but Asics resisted. Asics kicked off the 1980s with the release of the Fabra Superlight basketball shoe that integrates a super lightweight EVA material, and over the next few years, Asics models, more advanced, adding Airflex holes and stabilizer pillar structure and becoming lighter. Then, Asics developed Gel, a silicone cushioning material, an innovative response to Nike Air's cushioning system. Asics Gel is a soft substance placed in the midsole of the shoe that increases protection and shock absorption. It is used in multiple layers, creating a soft foam for both the heel's impact especially. This was the standout feature of generations of Asics shoes, but they weren't done yet. By 1990, Asics unveiled its Research Institute of Sports Science in Kobe, Japan. The facility features tennis courts, pools, gymnasiums, and several laboratories, specifically made for testing, researching, and developing sports equipment. All of this is designed so that Asics stays ahead of the curve, maintaining the highest level of performance for its athletes and consumers. By now, the company's product range covered tennis, track and field, volleyball, wrestling, and many others, and the company's tentacles had spread all over the world, through Asia, North America, Europe, and the Pacific. Their bigger battle, however, had been in the media. Chapter 6: Culture Wars. While Nike opted for mass appeal, advertising through celebrity endorsements, Asics remained committed to focusing on sportswear exclusively. Asics sponsored hundreds of athletes, none more famous than tennis superstar Novak Djokovic, as well as national and regional sports teams. The company is still the official manufacturer of the Australian cricket team and the World Athletics Organization. But Asics still broke through with some notable appearances in pop culture. In 1978, martial artist Bruce Lee wore a pair of Onitsuka Tiger Mexico 66s during the film Game of Death. Later, Uma Thurman sported a similar gold pair of original Onitsuka Tachi shoes in the 2003 movie Kill Bill. And into the 21st century, Asics realized the appeal of these more retro styles of shoes. And so under the original Onitsuka Tiger label, Asics re-released popular models like the Mexico 66 and Ultimate 81. Beyond footwear, Asics has branched out to clothing, and today the brand collaborates with designers and athletes on a range of products. And in 2007, Kihachiro Onitsuka died at the age of 90. He was active in the company he founded up until his final days. In 2018, to celebrate what would have been his 100th birthday, Asics released a range of products featuring a sunflower painted by Kihachiro Onitsuka. Chapter 7: Today. In 2021, Asics had $3.6 billion of global turnover last year, operating in 1,900 direct outlet stores dotted around the world. It has also expanded its portfolio with the acquisition of outdoor brands Haglofs and Runkeeper to diversify its product range. Last year, Asics made the controversial decision to pull its products from independent retailers in the United Kingdom, selling its products online and in bigger retailers going forwards. They are not the first big brand shoe to do it, with Nike and Adidas taking similar measures. In some countries, over 40% of Asics sales are online, which is removing the incentive to maintain an in-shop presence at smaller outlets. Nike is now significantly bigger than its old partner Asics. In fact, Nike is the largest athletic shoe supplier in the world. But the Asics approach of continuing to innovate towards more effective sportswear has earned it a loyal customer base of athletes and fitness enthusiasts. Nike's dominance did not crush Asics as it did with many of its other competitors. Instead, the company remains a valued part of the athletic world. Even though Kihachiro Onitsuka began developing shoes with no experience, his dedication to quality, consistency, and a mission to reinvigorate a generation created one of the most successful footwear brands Japan has ever seen.